kura mwezi wa 8, angalau swala hilo liwe limeshughulikiwa japo kwa kiasi kidogo?
Kwa sasa tuelewe, Azimio haiko kwa serikali. Jubilee ambayo iko kwa serikali ni chama moja baina ya vyama 26 za muungano wa Azimio. Lakini ni kweli iko uhusiano mzuri kati ya kinara wangu na rais aliyeko. Kwa hivyo wananchi waelewe, hatuwezi kama Azimio kuamua ni vipi. Lakini tukichukua mamlaka, na Mungu atusaidie na wananchi tuchukue, tumepeana ahadi ya kwamba kwa siku 100 za kwanza gharama ya maisha itateremshwa, na ziko njia kadhaa za kufanya hivyo, na kinara wangu ashaelezea. Na hii si mara ya kwanza gharama ya maisha imejaribiwa kuletwa chini na serikali. Wakati tulikuwa kwa serikali ya Rais Kibaki tukiwa na kinara wangu, serikali ilijaribu kuleta gharama ya maisha chini na kufanya kutafuta mbinu za kupatia wenye viwanda vya kusiaga unga mahindi kwa bei nafuu, ndivyo unga ishuke. Ziko njia kadhaa za kufanya hivyo, na tumepeana hiyo ahadi. Wa sasa ile tunaweza tu ni pengine kinara wangu kuongea na mwenzake, lakini mkumbuke hizi ni siku za mwisho na hatujui mipango ya ndani ya serikali.
Mheshimiwa Odinga, umejaribu kumweleza rais moja kwa moja kuhusu swala hili unapoenda maeneo mbalimbali kutafuta kura, ukamwambia labda watu wanasema hivi kuhusu gharama ya maisha, watu wanasema hivi kuhusu bei ya vyakula, na labda kama ana suluhisho la muda kabla, iwapo utakuwa unachaguliwa kama rais, uchukue usukani, ama mwingine yote ambaye atakuwa anachaguliwa kuwa rais?
Sitaki kuongea kwa niaba ya serikali. Lakini mimi ningependa kusema ati ni kweli tumezungumzia mambo haya, na mimi najua labda hakuna changamoto zingine. Manake vile unavyojua shida wako naye ni kwamba serikali haitembei pamoja. Iko nusu ya serikali ambayo inapinga yale ambayo serikali inajaribu kufanya. Wao wanacheza siasa na maisha ya Wakenya. Ati wao wanasema wao ndio wanasuluhu, wakipewa hatamu ya uongozi katika nchi hii watateremsha gharama ya maisha chini. Sasa unauliza, wewe uko katika cabinet, baraza ya mawaziri, na hiyo baraza ya mawaziri ndio inatoa uamuzi yale ambayo nitakanya ifanyike. Baba hayuko katika cabinet. Naweza tu kutoa ushauri kwa rais mwenyewe, lakini yeye mwenyewe na wenzake ndio wako katika serikali. Kwa hivyo sisi tumeweza kutoa pendekezo, lakini saa zingine wanapata ugumu hapa na pale ambao mimi mwenyewe siwezi kuyaingia. Lakini sisi tunaweza kuongea juu yale tutayafanya, na mimi naweza kuhakikishia Wakenya ati ahadi ambayo tumetoa sio mzaha. Ni ahadi ambayo tunajua ni deni kwa Wakenya. Manake sio mara ya kwanza sisi kuwa katika serikali. Tuliingia katika serikali wakati hali ya uchumi ilikuwa mbaya zaidi, na vile vile wakati ile yani mambo ya ufisadi ilikuwa juu zaidi. Tupoingia huko tena tulikuwa tumeahidi Wakenya tutaleta somo la bure ya primary shule, na tulipoingia na imna hii tukaanza kutekeleza somo la bure, na vile vile tukatafuta mbinu ya kuleta kazi kwa vijana ambaye ilisaidia vijana kupata pesa kidogo kwa mfukoni mwao, kama ile kazi mtaani ambayo sasa inaitwa. Na hiyo ilikuwa inafanywa katika pembe zote za taifa. Ikasaidia vijana kukuwa na pesa ambayo wanaweza kutumia kununua chakula, na vile vile tukaagiza mahindi kutoka ng'ambo, tukalipa sisi kama serikali, na tukalazimisha NCPB kuuza hizo mahindi kwa bei nafuu kwa mtambo za kusaga mahindi ili bei ya unga irudi chini kwa wananchi, na ilifanyika mpaka hiyo iliendelea mpaka baadaye tulipokuwa na mavuno, chakula ikarudi sawasawa na gharama bei ya chakula ikarudi chini. Kwa hivyo kuna njia ya kufanya haya, na sisi tunahakika tukiingia katika serikali ndani ya siku 100 ili tumeahidi tutapunguza gharama ya maisha kwa Wakenya wote.
Allow me to wrap this up with one question. While you say you're not in government, and that could be the case, but your critics will say, since the handshake, you have some level of leverage, the assumption. Does that in any way give you some extra baggage in terms of looking for votes, well aware of some of the challenges that the government has experienced, especially in the second term? Does it in any way affect your search for votes?
You know, Kenyans are basically not stupid. My competitors are saying that the stupidity died in Kenya and was buried. Kenyans know very well that I'm not in government. I don't earn a salary in government. I don't live in government house. I don't get any allowance from government. But I can give some advice. And advice, as you know, is just what it is. I mean, it is not implementable. The receiver can use it or cannot use it. But having been in government, I also know the challenges which a government also faces. Like this crisis we're in right now, it's a serious crisis. You can see the way the cost of crude oil has gone up. You know, and when the cost of oil goes up, virtually everything else goes up in a country. We know that for a fact, because everything else depends on oil in terms of manufacturing. So it is unfair really to just do a blanket blame government. Somebody who is earning a salary, has got over 250 security of government defending him, is using government vehicles and equipment to do the campaign. To come out and say he's not in government, it asks mtu wa kitendawili ndio anajua yeye ndio yako ndani ya serikali. Mimi nilitolewa kwa serikali. Kama ulitolewa kwa serikali, you do the decent thing that most responsible people do. You resign. That is what Mr. Bill Kagia did. That is what Jaramogi Oginga Odinga did. You resign and then you become an ordinary person. But you don't say you're out of government and you're blaming that same government, but you're earning the salary from the same government. If that is not hypocrisy, then I don't know what hypocrisy is.
I think if I may add just a little, you can't also choose which part of government you will claim credit for and which part you disown. If somebody is standing in the podium and telling people that have influenced this to happen in government, they must also take the blame for any shortcoming of government. And that's the way it is.
We'll come back into the politics of the campaign and the back and forth and who bears what responsibility as we continue this conversation. There's something that you've touched on there, Mheshimiwa Raila, which is on social protection, protecting the vulnerable, and cash transfer program, like you implemented earlier. You have been promising 6,000 shillings in campaign rallies in the public. Now, there's a lot of misconception and misunderstanding of what this 6,000 shillings is all about. Who qualifies for 6,000 shillings? When do they start receiving 6,000 shillings? In fact, when you promote this interview this evening, somebody already sent us a message saying that we ask you for 2,000 shillings.
Deposit.
Alafu utakata ukiingia serikali. So who qualifies? What is this 6,000 shillings for, who qualifies for it?
Let me say this. First, there are the facts and there are also jokes about it. The fact is that we are talking about a social protection program. And it's not being introduced in this country, only in the world. It is something that exists in other countries in the world. Like in the UK, most European countries, United States, it's in Brazil. On the continent, it is in Egypt. It is also in Namibia. In fact, we have a Kenyan who helped to design the Namibian program, who is the one who has actually worked with our experts here. And what we're talking about is a number of Kenyans who live below the poverty line. These figures are taken from the Bureau of Statistics, and they have already been profiled. About 2,000 families. When you talk about 2,000 families, you're talking a family, say 4 people per family. Then you're talking about 8 million people. And these are people you're giving money, the family, not individuals. And so if it's 6,000 per family for 2 million people, that's 12 million shillings.
12 billion
12
shillings.
billion.
12 billion shillings
Is it per year, per month?
per month.
Per month.
That works to 144 billion shillings per year. We have already costed it, okay? 144 billion shillings per year. We know, for example, the kind of pilferages and losses. The president one day talked about 2 billion shillings per day that is being lost to corruption. President Obama also put it at about 700 billion equivalent Kenyan shillings. So that is roughly what it is. And I know it has how, but most of that money is being lost through procurement, particularly through procurement and also through collections. You know, because the budget basically consists of income and expenditure, government. You are under-collecting, and then you are overspending. That is what it is. If you say about 700 billion shillings is being lost to corruption, if you basically try to block this, you can have a saving, say, of 500 billion shillings. We are talking of only 144 billion shillings. See, but we have also been in the government before. When we went into the government, we found a treasury which is almost empty. The coffers are almost empty. The growth was also negative. The revenue collection was very low, generally. But then we immediately realized the cause of it. The revenue officers, basically, are the boys in town. They're the ones who are buying apartment blocks in town. They're the ones who are driving the latest model of cars. They're the ones who are constructing castles in the rural areas. They're the ones who are building high-rise buildings in village markets and so on. So if you do a lifestyle audit, you'll be able to just get rid of this. And what we did exactly that. We suspended them, we did a lifestyle audit, and we actually sacked some, retained those who were not very tainted, transferred them. The other side is the expenditure side of the budget. You have these so-called, they call them procurement officers. They're all seconded into ministries from the treasury. They are the other group, like the revenue officers. Exactly the same thing. The procurement at that time was being done through these officers. There's a government requirement that any procurement above 100,000 shillings had to be done competitively. In other words, you had to advertise in at least 3 leading newspapers.
Yep.
And then there must be at least 3 bidders. And then you award to the lowest, as it were. What we discovered was that each and every one of these procurement officers had 3 companies registered. And so then there was a collusion that this officer is in health, he's supplying water. This one is in water, supplying agriculture. The one in agriculture is supplying roads and so on and so forth. There's a collusion. So anytime you advertise, you will get three bids. And all of those 3 bids are coming from one person. And then the cost is heavily inflated. Like they will be buying, say, a calendar which should be costing 20 shillings, be buying it 100 shillings. An item which is supposed to be costing 50 shillings is bought at 1,000 shillings. And then that amount of money is shared between these people.
So you're
That's how revenue is being lost. I'm just trying to elaborate to you how these 2 billion shillings
gets lost.
Get lost in the government. It is not a fictitious figure. It is something that is realistic. And if you pay proper attention, you can actually save that money and use that money for the kind of program that we're talking about. This is just one of them.
So if we were to look at this 6,000 shillings, why 6,000? Why not 7? Why not 5? Why 6?
6 is because this will bring these people to what we call the minimum, basically, level. Yeah, I mean, more than $1, $3 per day. And they will be able to live like other people. And it is not just a waste. You see, it is an investment. Because when you do this, the people, I mean, in the rural areas particularly, the purchasing power of these people go up. The shops in the rural areas can now do business. So the economy, the rural economy itself is stimulated through this amount of money. So it's like an economic stimulus program. It is not just a waste.
With a ripple effect.
Yes.
My final part on this particular question is currently the government has a program called the Inua Jamii, which is a cash transfer program to the elderly, to persons with disability, severe disability, and to vulnerable and orphans. So is this a similar program? Are you going to scrap the Inua Jamii program, or are you consolidating the Inua Jamii program and just adding from 2,000 shillings to 6,000 shillings?
If you go into your records, you'll find that I'm the one who launched the Inua Jamii program in Mombasa when I was Prime Minister. It was really our idea to help the elderly people and also the people with disabilities and so on. Those are people who are not able to really fend for themselves. And it was capped at 2,000 shillings. That is a separate program. These are the other group of people. Some of them, those other ones may also be included in this group. But this is over and above the Inua Jamii program. This one here is targeting those specific families who have been profiled by the National Bureau of Statistics. Okay.
Okay. Well, former Premier, it's a good thing you've spoken about corruption, and I believe Honorable Martha, you can just speak up after him because this is a docket that directly translates to you. Now, corruption is a big thing, as the One Kenya Coalition has spoken about, and I believe it formed the premise upon which you added that extra docket of the Justice and Legal Affairs to the Deputy President when you were mentioning your shadow cabinet. Now, this would necessarily mean that the Deputy President is overseeing policies and issues pertaining to the Justice and Legal Affairs, but many would argue that in the long run it would have a ripple effect in affecting the independence of institutions such as the Office of the Public Prosecutor, we have the DCI, we have the ACC. So how then would you ensure as the executive that you do not compromise on the independence of these institutions that should be so?
Coach is going to talk to you about the details.
Yeah.
But let me just tell you that we have one government. And the government now consists of three arms. You've got the executive, you've got the judiciary, and you've got the legislature. All these three arms are interdependent. If one is not working properly, efficiently, it actually affects the other arm of the government. See, so it is necessary, therefore, for these three arms of government, in spite of the independence, to also see the interdependence of them, because they are all providing services. The executive cannot perform its work if the judiciary is not working. You see, if the judiciary is not working, it actually affects the executive. See, when you are talking about the criminals, and if these criminals are arrested, and then they are taken to court, and then they are released, of course, they become a drag on society. You've got, how many cases have you had a criminal who was killed or who was threatened to kill? I think it just happened last week. He's taken to court, is being given bail, he comes out and goes and kills his mother. See, so something is wrong somewhere, which must be addressed. The same thing with the legislature. If Parliament is the one that passes the laws, the executive implements the laws which Parliament has passed. They use those laws to govern the country. Then the judiciary interprets the laws and to see that the laws are being implemented, they're not being violated. But if the legislature makes wrong laws, then the executive also work is affected. So there must always be a kind of cooperation. I think people are pushing this word so-called independence too far, as if they are in different countries. That you've got, like, for example, independent, we've got these commissions that we set up in the Constitution, that each one of them is now dependent on its own. You cannot interfere with what they're doing. They are protected by the Constitution, even if they're not doing their work, or even they're doing it wrongly, that there's nothing you can do about it. I don't think that is what is intended in the Constitution. You see, there's independence and there's also interdependence, generally. So, like when you talk about the criminal justice system, you've got the investigative arms of government. Then you've got the procedural arm of government, the DPP. Then you've got the judiciary. You see? So sometimes you find the police themselves collude to shield criminals. But sometimes the police have done their work. The DCI has done its work and has gotten sufficient evidence. The DPP refuses or says this evidence is not sufficient. And it's discretionary to him. He refuses to prosecute. Or then it agrees to prosecute, takes to court, then the courts themselves are compromised. And you know that courts sometimes are compromised. So a court that is compromised, in my view, is worse than the criminals, because it protects the criminals. Okay? But then, this is a conversation I've had when I was a prime minister before, with the then Chief Justice, when we were having those problems. But that was, of course, the situation prior to the new constitution. Okay? So my view is that, yes, independence is there, but there's also interdependence of these arms of government, because ultimately you want the delivery of services to the people to be done efficiently.
Okay. Well, Honorable Martha, I'm sure there's a lot of uncertainty to this role because you'll be the deputy president and there's also this additional role. And according to Article 147(4) of the Constitution, you cannot hold two offices. So maybe if you just respond to the same and clarify what this would mean as a member of the executive overseeing certain arms of the judicial aspect.
I think that's a misconception.
Okay.
If you look at the description of what a deputy president does, is be the principal assistant of the president and perform any other duties assigned by the president. So any other duties is covered. You can hold a ministerial docket. And there's no difference when a deputy president holds a ministerial docket and when any other minister holds. So the framing of the question as though having a deputy president hold the office of Justice and Constitutional Affairs Ministry is an oppressive thing, is wrong, is misleading. It is a ministerial portfolio like any other. And for people to understand the three arms of government, it's like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. The three of them fall into place and make the whole. So they are independent but interdependent. And the Justice Ministry is a coordinating ministry. It doesn't prosecute. It doesn't arrest. It doesn't decide on the cases. So it's a more policy and coordination so that when arms of government get together and you want to find where things are not moving, and whether we are moving according to the policy direction, and to support each other in execution, not in decision-making. When the government proposes to Parliament a bill, it doesn't sit in Parliament to pass that bill, but it's a government proposal. When the government, sitting with the judicial arm, asks for speedy movement of cases, it doesn't go in to determine those cases or to hear the evidence. It's talking about policy direction. So that, for instance, if we need any law to limit how long certain cases can sit, then it's agreed together in a consultation. Proposals are made by the relevant department and placed forward. So there's no contradiction whatsoever. The Azimio government will be a government that upholds the rule of law and constitutionalism, and you strictly do things in accordance with the law. So I'd like people to know that it is not a contradiction for a deputy president to have additional responsibilities assigned by the president. Okay. And that's precisely what we are talking about. And fighting corruption, if I may add, is more than just about going to court. It involves giving the public confidence that the government is serious about what it is doing so that the public can be partners in the fight against corruption. And if we wind backwards and go to 203, basically when the NAC government came in, the public was so inspired by the zeal and the commitment of the NAC government that members of the public could actually stop policemen from receiving bribes on the roads. Members of public chose to walk to force the matatu industry to accept the Michuki rules. Members of public recovered the Kenyatta International Conference Center from those occupying it and claiming ownership and handed it back to the relevant ministry. This is the kind of thing we are looking for, that we will demonstrate our commitment to fighting corruption and make the public our partners in this fight. And that goes beyond just applying the law, and also working seamlessly with those in the criminal justice sector, the courts, the legislature, where we need to tighten the laws, etc.
Okay. Well,
yeah.
Even as we continue with certain aspects of the manifesto that you gave out as a coalition, a big and integral part of this year's election is pegged around the women factor.
Yeah.
And when we talk about the women factor, we talk about the two-third gender role representation, especially in the bicameral house. Now, your competitors, from the suggestions that they've been given, many have argued there's a lot of practicality, for lack of a better word. They've spoken about giving half of the government to the women. They've signed charters. They've also spoken about putting up a kitty for the women. And they've added to that and said that they're going to achieve the two-third gender rule within the first 100 days in office. On your side, what is the assurance that you're giving women, despite you being potentially being the first female deputy president? What assurance are you giving people to say that, you know what, moving forward, we're going to have better representation of women in our government?
It's easier said than done. For us, the commitment is demonstrated. Right now, Azimio is not saying that we will do for women A, B, C, D. My principal, seated right here next to me, appointed me his deputy. That's a demonstration of the commitment. So when we say that we will fulfill, we will continue the implementation. My part, I propose